So what do you think the creative direction was when they're like...
I just clicked to the next slide, and it says spoink, and the one note from Max is must keep bouncing or its heart stops. That, to me, belies a lot of depth to the Pokemon universe.
Take it all back. Spoink has pulled me in to the Pokemon universe. Look at this stupid little...
All right. Ready to go? Mm-hmm. Great. In that case, allow me to welcome you to a brand new episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. I'm here as always with my co-host, Anthony. If my friendship with him was a human child, they'd be able to drive now, Maddox.
That's crazy. How old do you have to be to drive? I don't even know.
16? Yeah,
okay.
16 you get your learner's permit.
I thought you were going to say drink, and I was like, it has not been that old, but yeah.
Not drink. We're not there yet, but definitely drive. I think that the driving rules are actually state by state. I don't think there's actually a federal mandate.
I think that's true.
I think in a lot of more rural states or states with more rural economies, it's more likely to get your driver's license early because you want to be able to help out with farm equipment and stuff. Is my understanding.
And you can't get anywhere without a car if there's no, public transit in rural areas.
There's barely public transit in our urban areas, so, Anthony, it's our 5th anniversary of Lucky Paper Radio. If our podcast was a human child, it would be in kindergarten.
What can you do in kindergarten? What are your first privileges?
I do have some friends' kids who are about as old as our podcast, so I can be like,
that's crazy to think about.
There he is. There goes Lucky Paper Radio, the podcast child. And we're starting to learn how to read. We probably can read a small book.
Yeah, I was going to say, doesn't reading happen a lot sooner? I'm not really up on childhood development.
It does not.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like my neighbor's 5.5-year-old kid got good at writing his name 6 months ago, and can muddle his way through a very simple book, but is not reading anything complicated. I don't think he's way behind devoupmentally. Maybe he is. This is how I find out.
This one reference point is not great.
I just don't know.
Anyway, 5 years. That's crazy. I mean, it's cliche to talk about how the passage of time feels crazy, but it is also just shocking.
True. It's a cliche for a reason. Yeah. Because it is actually, in fact, shocking. Yeah. And I got to say, Anthony, 5 years in, and I am burnt out. Not on recording the podcast. Okay. This part is great. I love this part. But I am burnt out on editing the podcast, Anthony. It has been 5 years of effectively, I would say, no breaks. We had, I believe, 2 weeks in 5 years where something other than a main feed normal episode was released. Other than that, it has been every single week, 4 or 5 weeks, plus a bunch of bonus episodes. And that's just the podcast. There's all the website stuff, too. And I'm so tired of editing podcasts.
I get it. I'm sorry that we didn't have this conversation sooner.
No, we've been talking about it for a little while, transparently, behind the scenes. And we're doing something about it, Anthony, which is that we are finally going to start a Patreon. Which, if you are a longtime listener to the show, you will know that this is something we've said many times that we were not interested in and didn't want to do. And I still have many, many reservations about it. I'm not just sitting here thinking this is an easy win and there's no compromises to be made. But frankly, if it came down to me editing the show every week and that was the only option, I would probably stop making it soon because I want more room in my life for other creative hobbies and other things. And we were talking with a friend at Magic Night recently. They're like, what do you do in your spare time? And I was like, well, I play Magic and then I edit a podcast about Magic. And then after that, cook.
Go to sleep and wake up and do it again.
Yeah.
It should be clear. How long does it take? It's like for every minute of audio that we record, it takes, 3 times as long for you to edit?
Yeah, thereabouts. So people may not know, right, if they're listening to the finished product, but Anthony, we're not great broadcasters, let's be honest. I feel this very concretely when I do live streaming or something where there is no editing process. But I think we have very interesting conversations. I love you as a podcast co-host, but we make a lot of mistakes. We go back and take things again. We have a lot of filler words. So I very carefully edit and have edited every episode of this podcast, save for the couple that I say up front are not edited for some reason, which there are a couple historically like that, if they're recorded with a big group of people or the recording setup wasn't as good. But yeah, so we record for a little over an hour every week, hour 15 usually, thereabouts.
Sometimes 3 hours, depending on what happens.
Well, yeah, there have been 4-hour episodes of this podcast or 3-hour episodes of this podcast, and yeah, it takes me about 3 times the runtime of the episodes to edit them, which involves listening to every, second of the audio and going through and cutting out any blank space, any filler words, any time that we said something and then took it again because we didn't like how the sentence came out of our mouth, which happens quite a bit. And it's very time consuming. I'm also, while I'm doing that, I'm recording timestamps. I'm recording a list of everything that we mentioned or said we'd put in the show notes to link to. And I'm also recording a list of every single card we mentioned in chronological order, which is also somewhat time consuming.
And also making a cool creative intro for every single episode.
Well, yeah, that is like a total coin flip in terms of how much time that can take. I have spent days on certain episodes, and you probably know which ones, and other intros I literally am just clipping some audio out of something that someone sent me, and it takes me no time at all. So huge variability in that, but a ton of work goes into making this show. I looked at a couple of recent episodes just to get a sense, and on average for an hour-long podcast, I make somewhere between 250 and 350 edits.
That's crazy.
Yeah, a ton. Multiple a minute, every minute for the entire podcast, basically. So I'm getting tired of it. And I want the show to keep going, and I don't want it to become something that I resent or am not looking forward to. And I can feel that burnout coming in, and I want to get ahead of it, which is why we are starting a Patreon primarily with the goal of hiring an editor so this podcast can keep going without me having to spend 3 to 4 hours editing it every single week.
I mean, it's just such a huge labor of love that you've put in for the last 5 years, and I feel like I should thank you, and I feel like the listeners should all thank you because you've done a lot to make a show that a lot of people will listen to and enjoy.
That's very kind of you, and it's worth noting you put in a lot of work too. I mean, I at some point, probably 4 years ago at this point, was like, Anthony, can you please help me by writing the notes every week? So I give you a pretty sloppy document with the cards mentioned, and oftentimes I'll be like, I don't know what card this was. It was some 4-mana Sphinx from this thing, or I definitely spelled it wrong. And so you have to go through and format those and actually write the description of the episode and put it all into sort of the text file we use for the website, which is not a trivial amount of work. I know some weeks you also spend time changing the code for the website so you can put a Rothko painting on the cards mentioned page.
That's true. That was definitely worth it.
Or writing a script to go through and label the specific versions of cards if we're talking about them from one specific cube, so you're not looking at, some weirdo Final Fantasy lightning bolt instead of normal lightning bolt. It's a ton of work for both of us, and this is not even talking about all the work that Parker does for editing the website. I mean, Parker has written around 60 articles for Lucky Paper at this point, which is...
I think you got to be underestimating that again. It's probably 130 at this point.
Well, we last were asked to estimate it. We underestimated it, and the answer was 55 or something. So it's probably 65-ish now. He's written
I thought it was even more than that, because I think I guessed 20 and was still off by a order of magnitude. Not an order of magnitude.
Parker does a ton of work for this, too. And the reason that Parker's been doing all that work is, partially because Parker's great at it. He's very skilled, and it's a labor of love for him. But also because I was spending a bunch of time editing the podcast, and I didn't have more time to commit to doing anything else for Lucky Paper. I didn't have more time to write articles, to coordinate with contributing writers, to do any of that stuff. I just don't have time. I mean, honestly, I feel bad, but I rarely have time, it feels like in my life, to read over something Parker has written and give him useful feedback, which is, I just wish I had more of that. So yeah, we're starting a Patreon, and that is the primary goal. I want to touch on my reservations with Patreon, just to say them, because again, if you're a newer listener to the show, you won't have heard us say any of this, but over the years, many people have asked, hey, where's your Patreon? Which I think sometimes it's a very kind thing. They're like, I want to give you some money. I feel like you provided some value to me, and I want to show you that, which is very kind. Sometimes it's genuine confusion. They're like, well, everybody has a Patreon that has a podcast. Where's yours? And they think they just haven't been able to find it, but surely it exists. And it hasn't existed for 5 years. And
I mean, that is pretty extreme, that reaction. And I feel like when we started the podcast 5 years ago, I was definitely of the opinion that, yeah, maybe we could do that. But, the first step to starting the podcast is get a rhythm down, build up an audience, figure out what your style is, and then maybe think about starting a Patreon. And I think the culture has just changed so dramatically, where now somebody's starting a new podcast or starting any creative endeavor, the first thing they do is set up a Patreon, and people just think that's normal, which to me is crazy.
Well, this is why it's such a conflicted topic for me, because I believe in the value of creative labor. I believe that we should live in a society that helps people that make something that people value get reimbursed for their time.
Absolutely.
I'm never going to begrudge anybody, trying to get that. Well, that's not true. I'll begrudge you if you take a sponsorship from some crappy cryptocurrency company or something, or some whatever. But
just a totally random example.
Just a random example. But I won't begrudge you for trying to, get some value out of your time spent on a creative project. And we also are coworkers. People may not know this. We work together in web development and are both childless and, living in a relatively affordable city as far as American cities go. And frankly, it just I haven't needed the money, right? Like the money is not an important thing for me. I didn't feel like I needed to monetize my hobby, the thing I did for fun, to make it worth my time. And that's still not the goal, right? Like I have no idea how much money we're going to make from this Patreon, which we'll talk about as well. But if we end up making more than we need to pay an editor, then I have plans for what I want to do with that money that is not just put it in my pocket. It's still something that is not interesting to me to profit off of this endeavor. And that's because I really think that taking something you love and turning it into just making it compatible with the free market is a great way to just fall out of love with it so quickly. I really don't ever want to be thinking about this show in terms of well, what if we do that and we lose some Patreon supporters? Or how can we make some content that's going to go viral so more people will join our Patreon? I never want to think about it in those terms. And I think it's hard not to. I think it's really hard not to as soon as you give yourself that metric. We've talked about this with analytics before, right? I don't really care how many people are listening to the podcast. Truly, there's a certain number that I want to be listening for it to be worth it to me to spend an N number of hours every week making it. But I don't want to care about which episodes perform the best or perform the least best. That's not a way I want to think about this endeavor of ours.
It's really easy to let any kind of quantifiable metric sort of dictate the way you're doing things, and I agree, so often that leads to making a thing which is, less authentic, less passionate, less interesting, and maybe more effective in some way that is making a number bigger.
Right, because what I'm saying is I don't want to think about it, but we do have analytics. It just comes with our podcast host. I can't turn it off. I didn't add it intentionally. And so I can just go on and see all the episodes that people have listened to the most or least. I can see a little graph of when people on average stop listening to the episode.
You can make the graph really big and look at a big graph.
That's true. Just having that there, having that quantified, changes the way I engage with it in a fundamental way that I have to acknowledge I don't have the willpower to just completely block out and ignore, right? And this will be a new quantifiable metric that, it will at least, in some kind of implicit way be speaking to the value of the thing we're making, right? I'm actually quite sensitive, which I think maybe people don't get from my assertive tone on the podcast or maybe how I talk about things. But we've talked about my sort of sensitivity to certain types of feedback on the show before. And yeah, I'm sensitive to the idea that a bunch of people all of a sudden decided this thing isn't worth it to them anymore, right? I wish I could say that I was above that, but this is a new way to measure that kind of interest that is going to introduce more challenging ways to engage with that idea of how valuable is this thing that we're making to people that I would rather not introduce. But as I said, I can't edit the show every week for another 6 months. I just don't have it in me. So this is the best way, I think, to keep the show going.
Yeah, and I think that's always been your approach with the website as well, is just making sure it's sustainable, doing things in a way that, maybe you could put some money into the hosting to do more complex projects, but you don't want to just sit there having a large cost is that still going to work 5 years from now? And is it just going to start becoming this huge thing? So doing things in a way that is sustainable. So it's about having the Patreon just support the ongoing sustainability of this. And yeah. I do think, to your point as well, it's I definitely feel there are limitations to quantifying these things. I also totally get why so many people that are doing a podcast and want it to actually be for us, this is not a thing we're trying to make our career. For many people it is. They want to do an artistic creative thing, do a podcast, do YouTube videos, whatever it is, and actually make it their sole thing and their source of income. So obviously we're not saying that doesn't make sense in any circumstance. So to all the other people that I support on Patreon, obviously it is a system that exists for a reason.
Yeah, and I'm also not begrudging anybody that does engage with it in a way where they have to optimize these things, right? It's just a thing that I am very sensitive to not wanting to introduce to my love of this format and love of this community we've built and the people that are listening to the show that we really connect with. So I have found an editor, and they have already edited an episode of the podcast, though not one you have heard yet. You'll actually be hearing it next week. And honestly, I'll be interested to hear if there is a noticeable difference to you listening. I've listened to it myself, or at least half of it. I'm still working my way through it, and it sounds great. I'm really happy with their work. I'll ask them after the fact if they're happy to have their name on the podcast. I'm not sure if they want that to be known, but they are a listener. And editing our show is pretty unique because you do have to keep track of cards mentioned and all that kind of crap, which is a little bit annoying. The cost of editing the podcast, I'll just tell you, is going to be $200 a week for the show. So that means that if we're trying to pay for that, entirely from Patreon after fees and stuff, we're probably looking to try and make $1,000 a month on Patreon, which is a huge amount of money, a amount of money that I frankly don't expect to make. And I think the question becomes, how far short of that do we fall? And am I happy spotting the remainder of the cost to editing it, or editing one episode a month myself, or whatever? We'll figure out how that sort of works. But I don't really have any expectations for how much we will make on Patreon, but I'd be surprised, honestly, if we got there, at least in the near term, because it seems like just a huge amount of money. So that's the goal, though. That's what I'm aiming for. Hopefully, at some point in the foreseeable future, having that amount of money coming in so that we can have someone editing the show and just take this off my plate, basically. In the event that we do end up making more money somehow, or that I end up wanting to edit every couple shows for whatever reason and the cost of editing is less, there are a couple things that I would also like to do with this money. And the first is kind of obvious, which is Parker has asked basically to, not for compensation for himself, though I think he should be given compensation. That's another question. But Parker has asked basically for a fund of money to pay contributing writers to the website, which we have not ever sought contributions to the website, partially because, A, we can't offer anybody any compensation for it, and I believe writing is a valuable creative work that is deserving of pay, and I would not solicit it without the ability to pay for it. And B, it requires, did I say one or A? It doesn't matter. The second of two, it requires a lot of time on our end to edit it and like go back and forth with the writer to bring it into like our editorial voice. And also, frankly, like I don't want to tell somebody that we can like work on something with them and then they give it back to us and it turns out we're like, this actually isn't really our voice or what we want to say on the site, and then we're not actually going to publish it even though you put a bunch of work into writing it. It's just kind of a fraught thing. And so Parker has asked basically for some amount of money to go towards a fund to pay contributing writers to invest in more articles about cube theory from a diverse cast of authors, which is the thing I would love to support if we had the resources to do it. The other more ambitious thing, which I would love to do, we have been extolling the virtues of all of these local grassroots cube events that we've been going to, and you and I have been to a bunch at this point. I mean, maybe a dozen over the course of the past 3 years.
Sounds about right.
And they are truly my favorite way to play organized Magic. I can't imagine going to any other kind of tournament, and they are just the best. So good. And whenever we go to one of these tournaments, I would say that it is 85% locals. It's people that are actually just in Boston, in Baltimore, in New York, the CubeCon's a little different maybe, but for the most part, these smaller ones are mostly locals, and then there's a small group of people that are willing to spend the time and money to actually travel quite far to go to one of these cube events.
The traveling sickos, we all know them.
Yeah, and we're among the traveling sickos. We're willing to go further than most. And there's other people, the Gregs and Jakes and Ollies of the world, that are willing to travel to a thing. I want to make these tournaments accessible to as many people as possible. And they are, as far as I think a weekend activity goes, for the most part, they tend to be kind of affordable because you're not getting a lot out of it. You're not like walking away with product or anything. You're just showing up and playing for the weekend. But, judges are expensive. Space is really expensive for these events. So they have to charge something for a ticket. I want as many people to get to experience these small cube events as possible. I want to do everything we can to support them. And if we could use our position of sort of centrality, a little bit of centrality in this cube scene to take money from people that are donating to the show and use that to basically sponsor people going to a local cube event that they otherwise wouldn't be able to afford to go to, that would be an awesome thing I think we could do with an additional money if we got it. I am wary of making any promises of what we're going to do because, again, I need to pay for the baseline of editing this podcast before I can afford to spend any money doing this other thing. But in terms of what I would do if we all of a sudden were flush with cash, I would love to sponsor people to go to their local cube events, make an effort to make sure those are the kind of people we want at these cube events. I think Magic kind of has a consistent problem with just the general diversity of the people at a Magic event. You find relatively few women, you find relatively few people of color, you find, a certain income bracket tends to be well represented and other income brackets not so much. And I think the cube world is better when there's a more diverse group of people at these cube events, and the events themselves are also better for it. So if we could take some money from people donating to the show and then sort of funnel that to sending the best possible people to these local cube events, that would be a dream come true. And then maybe I could also design a really cool jacket for them, which would be also really fun. I would love to have the Lucky Paper Cube team, in the kind of in the spirit of the professional Magic teams that exist, but for our own local grassroots.
Sort of like a kitchen table pro tour.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. Those are the ideas that I have, but again, really this is coming from a place of like need. Like in order for me to continue to be excited about making this show, I need to not spend 3 to 5 hours every weekend editing it, plus an additional hour uploading it to the podcast host and downloading the notes you made and pasting them into the thing and scheduling it to go live at 6:30 a.m. on Monday. I'm still going to be doing all of that, to be clear, but like that's in addition to the time spent editing, which has just become a bit of a drag on me. So
yeah, it's interesting. I've heard Mark Rosewater say so many times for years and years that in order for Magic to survive, it has to change. Like the way that Magic dies is if it stays the same. And sometimes maybe I don't feel totally optimistic about that, but it's funny how there's a parallel here. Like the podcast has to change if it's going to survive, and that's okay. It's not going to be exactly the same. The editing's going to be hopefully still good, but it's going to be definitely different. And the kinds of projects that we're interested in pursuing in the future might be changing as well, but it's kind of gotta be that way.
Yeah, and that's something I do want to touch on is that like the editing will be different, and I would welcome people's feedback on it next week when the first show edited by somebody else comes out. But I told the editor, I was like, look, I know you're a listener. I know you've heard the show over the years. I don't want you to be trying to mimic my editing style, my production style. I want your voice to be somewhat present as well. And I have to accept that part of this is me giving up some creative control, knowing that the show is not going to be edited exactly how I would edit it if I were doing it every single week, which is a control I've had for 5 years. And I'm not a control freak, but I like control.
You are on the liking creative control side of the spectrum.
Let's put it this way. The person editing our show also edits some other podcasts. And for the other podcasts, they are also responsible for like uploading it and publishing it. And I would never in a million years make that someone else's responsibility, because the idea of a show being late because of something is... I wouldn't do that. So yes, maybe I'm a control freak. Whatever. I like control. But I have to accept
you care about the end results, and you want to make sure that you have the last touch on every plate that goes out.
I care a lot about the quality of the creative stuff I make, because I do it for creative satisfaction. So I want it to be good. That's why I do it. But yeah, I have to acknowledge that the show is going to change somehow fundamentally. Like it's going to feel a little different. You know, one example is that probably every third episode, I have some little dumb thing I've inserted in the editing booth where I'm correcting an error or maybe adding one little detail that I missed or something, which I just won't be doing anymore because I won't be editing it. I won't be in the editing booth. So that's a thing that will have to change. I'm still planning on doing intros. I have to do them more in advance to make sure that I get them to the editor in time so that all the timestamps can be correct. So it's like, so they probably won't be super topical necessarily if I'm doing them a couple weeks in advance. The other thing this brings up is that if we're making a Patreon, I also feel like we should give people something additional for donating. You know, I would love to just take money as support for the show, but I also feel like it's reasonable for us to give something back. And frankly, one of the reasons I also finally got over the hump of like actually wanting to do this, we've been talking about this for 6 months, 8 months, maybe like in passing, like here and there. And one of the things that really got me over the edge was wanting to make another podcast with you. And we've had people that have responded really positively to the shows that we've put out that have been the least about Cube. Now, not most people. Again, I look at the analytics. Like, these are not our most popular episodes, but a lot of the sort of diehard listeners are like, hey, I would love to hear more about pickles. Where's the pickle episode? You know, like that is an explicit thing people have asked for multiple times.
Good news. We know where the pickle episode is.
I love making podcasts with you, and we are going to make a bonus podcast, a whole separate podcast that has nothing to do with this podcast, except that it's you and I. And to be explicit about the fact that it has nothing to do with this podcast, the name of the podcast is Magic Doesn't Exist. And it is the show where you and I are allowed to talk about whatever we want, as long as it has absolutely nothing to do with Magic the Gathering. Which, for people that are huge fans of the show, that like have gotten to know our personalities over the year, that care about the stuff that doesn't maybe from a like content strategy perspective or like coherence perspective make sense in the Lucky Paper radio feed, there's a new podcast for that. And as of now, we've already recorded and released 3 episodes, one on pickles and mold, one on mechanical watches, and one on cultural exchange. So
And more pickles.
That one started with more pickles, but it was better to title it Cultural Exchange, I think. So that podcast will be available to people that donate through the Patreon. What else do we need to say, Anthony?
I don't know. I feel like you kind of buried the lead a little bit, because I think that's maybe the component that we're both most excited about,
it's
and
for
hopefully
sure.
a lot of our listeners will be excited about that as well. I'm excited to talk about stuff that's not Cube for sure.
Yeah, I'm genuinely excited about it. I'm excited about the name, the podcast art. I'm excited about being able to put copyrighted music in it, because it's not getting published on any sort of public platform. It's going to automatically scrape for music and remove it. So that'll be fun. It's I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to make, and I think people are going to like it a lot, at least a very small group of people. Again, I don't think the average listener cares to hear us talk about Koji, but if you are that person, if you want to hear us talk about Koji or mechanical watches, or the next one I have planned for you, Anthony, is going to be the Pokemon episode. So
oh no,
prepare yourself.
I will prepare myself by not thinking about Pokemon at all until then. And also to answer the obvious question here, we're not editing this episode.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's unedited. I mean, I cut the beginning and cut the end and put a song at the end, but I am not editing it the way this show is edited, so it'll be much more rough and organic. It is for the diehards, people that don't care about ums and uhs and stops and starts and maybe a little bit of dead air, because I can't make a new responsibility for myself that I have to because
that's kind of what it sounds
the responsibility
like.
that I'm trying to get away from. So one other detail about this, which I think most concretely speaks to how fraught and complicated I feel about this whole process, is that I would like to be transparent about our income and expenses if we're going to ask people for money. I don't think this is something that you have a responsibility to do. No, shade to anybody who doesn't want to do this. There's a million reasons to want to keep this private and not tell people. But as a sort of show of good faith to anyone that wants to donate to the show, I think it's nice to see what goes into making the Lucky Paper website and Lucky Paper Radio, the podcast. So we have put together a little page on the website, which is basically just shows income and expenses for this entire endeavor. Since we started it, the first expense is
the website.
From January of 2018, when I registered the domain name for Lucky Paper, which was almost a full 2 years? It was a while before we actually published anything on the site. So it goes back for a long time. I also think this is instructive for anybody that is interested in the content creation thing. I like the idea of having a public-facing record of what the books actually look like. And I have to keep track of this for my taxes anyway, so we can use our skills as web developers to also make this accessible and readable to people. And it's something I just feel is like I said, a show of good faith of like, look, you can see how much money we're making. You can go see how much money we made off selling the playmats and selling the posters for CubeCon. Go check it out if you want. But you can see kind of what goes into all of this. And then what we haven't built yet, which maybe we will build someday, is I think it'd be interesting to try and just estimate the amount of hours we spent on all this over the years, and then just tally up a little hourly rate for our total income, our total profit versus the actual time spent on the website.
I don't know how you would even judge that.
Well, I mean, for the podcast, actually, I think it's pretty easy. We've got N number of episodes, and it's pretty easy to say, well, it's been, between you and me, it's 2.5 hours to record total, and then I edit it for 4 hours, so it's like, we're talking about, you can just say every episode is roughly 6 hours, 7 hours, and there's 259 of those, so that's a pretty good starting point. And then
I don't know, there were some big bursts. By big bursts, I mean a couple months where I just spent every minute of my free time making the commander map.
Yeah, the commander map I'm saying is you'd have to be like, I probably spent 600 hours on that, right? You have to just kind of pull it out.
It was a lot of time.
And then Parker can probably give a reasonable estimate for how long it takes him to write the average article. We could just multiply by that. My point is that I want to sort of make it clear that at no point do I ever expect this to be like a money-making venture, right? But as this thing grows, then the people involved grow, it does need to support itself in some way. And so making our expenses public, which will be linked in the show notes, is part of doing that. So if you listen to the show for a long time, you've gotten a lot out of it. I would encourage you to go check out the Patreon, which will be obviously linked in the show notes, and consider supporting the show. I hate doing these kinds of pitches. I think it's crass and gross. But you go to a bar, you spend a night drinking, you tip your bartender $5 or whatever. If you come to the bar of Lucky Paper Radio every week and are enjoying the ice cold beer of an hour-long Cube discussion, consider tipping us $5 a month, to help keep making this show and give me room for more creative hobbies.
Save Andy's mental health.
I feel okay mental health-wise. I want to do more creative stuff. I have other plans that I've put off for literal years because I've been making this podcast. And it's honestly, part of it was being 5 years is so long.
It is.
And to have been putting off things for now at this point years that I have just I have the equipment to do that I just have been waiting for time to do it.
You want to list these on air?
No, maybe we'll get to that in the bonus feed at some point someday. The last thing I'll say about that bonus feed is that I also felt strongly about explicitly not putting other stuff that people in the main feed might care about in the bonus feed, right? If we're going to have more Magic discussion, if you're not going to sit down and record anything about Cube, why would I not put it in the main feed where all the people that like Cube already are, right? I don't like the idea of kind of taking just half the things we make and putting them behind a paywall and trying to bait you to pay for it by giving you a little taste and then saying there's more behind the wall.
The really good stuff. we didn't talk about yet.
Instead, it's a totally different stuff, right? So we will never talk about anything Cube related on that bonus podcast. If you just like this show because you like Cube and that's all you care about, you don't have to feel like you're missing out on anything. I didn't want people to have that sort of FOMO. I don't want to be trying to capitalize on that FOMO. It's really for people that just love the show, want to give back, and in exchange can hear us talk about other stuff if our personalities or our friendship is something that you enjoy being a party to. I guess we should also mention there will be a Discord as well. Oh, man, all this is so fraught. We're talking about it so much longer than I thought in all these sort of caveated, mealy-mouthed ways, but it's just, I don't know how else to do it. We talked at length about whether or not we should have a Discord server for this show, for the bonus feed, for whatever. And initially, you and I leaned pretty heavily no, because we are active members of the MTG Cube Talk Discord. That's a place that we've been active for years and years and years, have a lot of friends and communities. And if we're going to talk about Cube, I believe all the conversation about Cube should happen over there. And we have a lot of people over there that we talk about things with on a regular basis.
Yeah, I do really enjoy the fact that it's not like, oh, this is the Lucky Paper community, but it's like, no, Lucky Paper is a MTG Cube Talk podcast, and we are here in a space with lots of other people that are making other content, and it's very satisfying in that way.
Yeah, I don't want to be talking to an echo chamber. Like, I don't want to like build a little garden wall of just the people that like we know and like and only talk about this thing there with them. I like being part of that broader Cube community. However, I do think that if there were some portion of people that were backing the show that were in the MTG Cube Talk Discord, it would be very hard for them not to talk about the bonus episodes of the bonus podcast in that context. And so I think just pragmatically, it makes sense for us to have a separate place for people that are backers on Patreon. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I like sat down and made some of the channels, and I was like, I don't know. All the channels that I would make are things I think people should talk about in the Cube Talk Discord. But there'll certainly be ways over there for us to talk about food with people, for us to talk about the bonus podcast. Obviously, it's sort of the main pragmatic use for it. And whatever else comes up, we'll see what that community becomes. I have no idea until people start showing up, but that will also be included for anybody that supports us on Patreon. That's it. That's a 30-ish minute, deeply uncomfortable pitch for, can I please have 3 to 5 hours of my weekends back? Please.
I hope so.
Please. That's not this whole episode, though, obviously. We do want to have just a normal Lucky Paper Radio topic. And the thing that came to mind for me, Anthony, that I thought could fit in a little half episode here is that we have actually been local game store lists for now almost 2 months. We have talked before on the show about our great friends at the No Land Beyond game store in Baltimore, Maryland, and they are in the process of moving to a new space. They were in a space for a long time, for many years. They have a new space they're moving to, and the necessity of the move just meant that they couldn't quite finish everything in the new space before their lease on the previous space ended, and so we are in this interregnum between old New Land Beyond and new No Land Beyond, which is where we will resume Cube Night in the future. But for these past couple months, we have been in the position that I know a lot of people writing in to the show to ask questions are often in, which is either I don't have a local game store at all, I live somewhere where there's not a good local game store, or I have one, but they're not open to having a Cube Night, or they don't have enough space, or they charge us a bunch of money for, table fees, and we just can't afford to do it there. So how can I host a Cube Night without an LGS? And I can say that we've done it very successfully for the past 2 months in other spaces in Baltimore City.
It's been a valuable sort of test case, and I think I want to give this podcast a lot of credit for the fact that we have changed the way people play Cube in a big way. Like, again, this is our 5-year anniversary episode, and when we started this, the idea of, oh yeah, we just meet up on a Tuesday night and fill up however many pods we have based on the number of players, people bring their own cubes, that was not a thing. We kind of, in the Baltimore scene, figured that out, talked about it on the podcast, and a lot of other people have taken up that sort of strategy and made it work, which has been super, super exciting, and it's changed so much. And like you said, one of the biggest challenges that people face is just space. It's always going to be the most difficult thing to solve because challenge. A lot of other things are solvable. And being consistent and being clear about communication, these are things that you can just put in some work and make it happen. Making a space happen, it's not necessarily true. And we've been very fortunate for most of, the existence of our playgroup here. Well, it's been a long history, but in recent years to have a really great local game store that has just had open play space where we can organize Cube events every single week. And
has never charged us anything to run events there, has never even made any official people must spend money at the bar requests or anything. They've just been very generous about letting us play there. And I know from talking to the owners that a lot of times they're like, yeah, this Cube doesn't spend the most money all the time. So it has not been, unequivocally perfect for them, but we've been very lucky to have that space. So
But then people ask us, I'd love to start a local weekly Cube night just like you guys have, but I don't have a local game store that works for us, and we haven't really had a good answer. It's like, well, that's the toughest part, and it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I definitely felt a lot of trepidation the first week we were running this at a new space, because transparently, I have emailed and called a couple of the spaces that were local that seemed like they might work out. And we'll talk about these specific venues as well in detail. But I emailed a bunch of them just to be like, hey, here's what I've got. I've got potential to bring.
I can bring you 30 paying clients, hopefully paying.
Yeah, I can bring you 30. I can bring you 20 to 30 people that will probably pay, and we need big tables because we got to have
Ideally,
8 people at a
seat
table.
8 people. It's a pretty specific requirement.
Yeah, and they won't necessarily all be there exactly at the same time. They're going to kind of trickle in from 5:30 to 6:30, but then by 6:30 they should all be there. It's kind of a weird set of requirements. And nobody ever responded to any of my emails or returned any of my voicemails. Honestly, a couple of them then told me after the fact when I talked to them in person, they were like, "Oh, you got to message the Instagram." It's like, well, I'm never going to think of that. How would I know that's the thing I'm supposed to do? I would assume that's being managed by some person who has no authority to say what can or cannot happen in the space. It's just the social media manager, but apparently it's not the case.
I don't really know how the internet works
anymore. Honestly, it's all broken. It's really hard to do anything to get in touch with people. So we ended up showing up to the first night of Cube without having gotten any blessing or any sort of message from the venue that they had even heard we were coming.
But no rejection.
No rejection either. They didn't say no. And we went to a local beer garden in Baltimore, which is called Fat and Son, if you want to look it up and see what their space looks like on Google Maps or whatever. And we chose this place. I think beer gardens and breweries are among the best candidates for this kind of thing, because a restaurant doesn't really work. You can't have waiters coming to your table while you have magic cards out. You just can't. An actual restaurant is not going to work for this kind of thing, given the duration of a draft and events, given how much you have to move around, how much table space there is. A beer garden's great because they have tables, they have space, but they don't have wait staff, generally speaking. They don't have specific, reserved tables that you're being managed by a host or anything. It tends to be just kind of open seating. And so we found that if you just kind of show up and make sure everybody's supporting the local establishment, nobody was upset with us.
And not an unfamiliar space to have games very often. A lot of beer gardens and breweries will have a stack of board games, or giant Jenga, or what are the other classic games? Ping pong? Does that count?
Yeah, probably. I'm not the person that goes to the most breweries, so I wouldn't know, to be honest. But yeah, so we went to this place, Fat and Sonnen, and it worked out pretty well. It turns out that Tuesday nights, which is the night that we cube, is a relatively slow night for this particular beer garden.
I think that's key.
That's probably going to be true of any beer garden in your local area, though you should obviously check and see if they have other regular events that are happening in that time. But it turns out for them, Tuesdays was a relatively slow night. We took up 4 giant tables. Every week we were at Fat and Sonnen, and it was outdoors but covered by a pergola, gazebo, a ceiling. There was a roof over us, but no walls, open to the elements otherwise, which in the early summer was lovely because it was really nice outside, and sitting outside to play Magic was just the dream.
Even the one night, it gently rained.
Yeah,
we all remember Rain Cube.
It was fine.
It was great.
It was really fun. I liked playing outside
delightful.
To the pitter-patter of rain. And that worked out really well. Here's what I did, though. I did, on the first night, after nobody responded to my emails or voicemails, I went as early as I could, and I went to the bartenders at the respective bar that's attached to this beer garden. There's also a restaurant that does rotisserie chicken and other things that is attached to the same sort of seating area space. And I went and I just talked to both of them. I just told them hey, here's what we're doing here tonight. Let me know if anybody gives you any trouble. I tried to email, but nobody got back to me. And they were like, okay, cool, sounds fine. Let us know if you need anything. They were very chill about it. I asked their names, just be human and normal about things. And we were at Fat and Sonnen, I guess, for 4 or 5 weeks, a while.
I'm going to do the cliche time thing again if we go.
We were there for a while, and after a week or two of doing this, the staff knew most of us and was also thrilled we were there. They were like, it's a quiet night, and it's so great that there's more people here at the business, and we were making more money on tips and everything. They just had a positive reaction to us being there. The one and only tiny wrinkle is that we have one player that often brings cookies to Cube Night, and technically they don't allow outside food in this area because they have this restaurant attached, but then they were like, but it's cookies. They don't sell any sweets at the restaurant, so you're actually good, but don't tell other people they can bring food in here. It was totally fine, but that was the only thing even close to a weird wrinkle we had.
And we had that one bartender that was like, yeah, I play Magic, but no, you're not getting me to do that. But then we were like, are you sure? And he was like, maybe, I don't know, put me in the Discord.
we did meet multiple people that were just like, oh, is that Magic? That's cool. What are you playing? And them like answering that question. I think none of these people, as far as I know, have actually come out and joined us for a Cube Night yet, but we have like had tendrils in the broader community in a way that I really like. I love that
fun, yeah, to play Magic in a space that is not dedicated to it.
Yeah, I love that we're in public and we can just meet people that walk up and want to know what's going on. That I think is a great aspect of it. There are a couple logistical things about being at a beer garden that I do want to share that I think are helpful for people. One is like we've been very explicit, like we are in this space. This is not necessarily the case at the game store. Like you should have been spending money at the game store too. Like just human decency and like understanding of how the world works. You should have been buying drinks at the bar previously. Now that we're in a space that is only a bar and not also a game store, like just making a clear expectation that everyone's got to spend some money at this place while you're there. We're going to be there for 4 hours. Buy a drink.
Yeah.
That's the least you can do, quite literally.
And that, obviously that's going to be a barrier for some players, but unfortunately if you're in a space that is a business, that's the reality of it.
Yeah, and what I would say about it being a barrier is I have definitely like spotted people drinks many times before on Cube Night. I used to have a rule that if I like played against somebody that was there for their first time, I would always go get him a drink. Partially because I wanted to be welcoming to the community, but mostly because I was like, let me go show you what we do here. We spend money at the bar. see how we do this?
Model the behavior.
Yeah, model the behavior you want. There's ways to work around that, though it is going to be a barrier for some players for sure. The other thing I would say is that at our game store, we had like table-sized playmats, and so our whole play group was not used to bringing playmats out, and so I made a very conscious effort to like tell people to bring playmats, and then even though I told people to bring playmats, I brought 8 every week, and Nate brought I think about 12 every week, and I would say probably about half the people ended up showing up with playmats. So we ended up using the ones we brought in mass a lot. So if you are trying to start a new Cube Night at a beer garden or brewery, bring a bunch of playmats if you're the one that is like taking the initiative to actually start that thing.
Or bring a cube you're prepared to get sticky.
Bring playmats.
Okay, fine.
I think it's really helpful to have playmats to like reserve space, basically.
That's
to
true.
say like this is space is occupied, even if someone's not sitting here right now. And it's also, I think, just helpful to kind of
direct your players as well. Like this is the table we're sitting at.
Group people, like which is not the same, not quite the same as reserving space, but to be like we're all here together as a group, even though we're sitting at 2 separate tables because we couldn't fit at one table. This is actually all kind of one thing, right? It helps to kind of have a visual indicator of that. The other thing I did is I did ask the bartenders at this space. I was like, what can we do to make your life easier? Like, do you want me to tell people to bus things to a certain place? Like, just asking. It was just the same question we tell people to ask at a local game store, right? Like, ask what you can do to make this as easy as possible for them to run. And, like, for example, the place we were playing Fad and Son in, they told us the first night, like, yeah, you all got here kind of early, and, like, we're not used to having 12 people here at 5:30. And so maybe, like, let the drink orders be more staggered. Like, you were all very eager to show that you were going to give money to be here all night, but just, like, let it stagger out a little bit. So, like, little things like that you can just ask for. I mean, I think most people are probably not going to say anything, but if they do say something, you can do it. And if they don't, they at least know that you have shown good faith in trying to be a, like, good denizen of the space.
Yeah, I mean, and then like, okay, here's the spot to bus tables. I'm going to explain that to all the players. And, similarly, if you need to move furniture, I think is going to be often a need if you're trying to get people together. Ask, and then make sure you move the furniture back at the end of the night.
Yeah, which I hope is, like, obvious stuff, but if you're organizing a Cube Night, you might not think that like this is a type of leadership you need to demonstrate, but it absolutely is. Like,
and honestly, you're probably looking at like you're thinking the number one concern is the cards in your cube, and that's great that you're excited about that, but those are probably not the most important questions.
Yeah, it's definitely like the most important. Like, I don't care what kind of cube you bring, like whatever, like it'll be fine, but you do have to think about these things and just like assume a role of like leadership that isn't necessarily like
comfortable.
Well, comfortable, I was going to say, hasn't been, like, placed upon you by some external source. I think a lot of people are uncomfortable seizing control or, like, taking the initiative when there isn't some sort of larger body that is blessing them with that authority. And if you're the one organizing the Cube Night, you just got to understand that, like, you got to do this stuff. And it's, like, basic human things, like, tell people why you're there, ask them their names, ask them how you can be helpful, how you can, like, make their job easier, and then communicate that to your players and set clear expectations when you send out a little message before Cube Night. Reiterate the things, bring a playmat, spend money at the bar, don't bring any outside food, all that kind of stuff. It's, I think, pretty easy, but I know people struggle with this, and so it's important to just say, doing these things makes a huge difference, right? The number of people that will just, like, sit there and feel awkward and never ask a question that you could have just proactively answered and just told them ahead of time, like, here are the expectations. People just won't ask sometimes. They're not comfortable, right? And I imagine a lot of people are not comfortable because they're like, well, I don't want to take responsibility for all these people because they're not all with me. They're like strangers I'm playing Magic with or acquaintances I'm playing Magic with. But some amount of leadership is, I think, necessary to make this work.
For sure.
And I'll say, too, in the case of our local playgroup, having you and I primarily, and then I think some other people have kind of stepped up a little bit as well, having multiple people that are like equally sharing the responsibility of like making sure this stuff happens is great for a couple of reasons. The biggest one probably being that I can go on vacation and know that like Cube Night is fine. It will be fine. I don't need to like do anything. But also that it just, you can spread the load a little bit. So
come back home, all your plants are dead, your Cube Night's dead.
No, Cube Night can't be dead. Let the plants die. Keep the Cube Night alive. It did eventually get too hot in Baltimore to play at this particular location. We ended up moving then to a brewery, just a specific brewery, not like a shared space, one private business that was in some ways even better. They have a ton of space as well. They were also very amenable to us being there. The staff was very friendly and very helpful. It's indoors and air conditioned, which made a huge difference when it was like 100 degrees here in Baltimore. But the actual like arrangement of the space was not quite as good. Their tables were not as large. Their tables were basically all 6-person tables. And so in order to get 8 people around a table, some things had to be juggled around, which is a little bit of work. They also closed very strictly at 10, whereas previously our game store had like last call at 10, but you could leave a little later and it wasn't weird. They were always cleaning up the bar.
I was trying to be pretty good about getting everybody out at closing.
I was too, but it feels way more like they're cleaning up at 9:30.
Yeah,
so
they're ready to go
so
home.
they can lock the door at 10, right?
Yeah.
Which is a different thing than it was at our previous game store. So that's the thing we've had to be conscious of there, is just making sure that we're not like lagging behind and like causing them to be closing later than they want. But otherwise, that has also been equally, I would say, hugely successful, right? Like both of these venues, if Nolan Beyond never opened ever again, I have no doubt we could continue running Cube Night at one or both of these venues indefinitely, and it would take no major hit. We also didn't have I kind of thought maybe way less people were going to come out because it was more unknown, but we've had some record Cube Nights of like 32 people back-to-back weeks at Fadensonnen, and even on super rainy, stormy nights, we have 28 out at Peabody, which is the brewery we've been at when it's too hot. So I wanted to share this with people because I know that some people have heard the tale of our local Baltimore Cube Night and thought that it's not possible for them because they don't have an No Land Beyond. And I'm here to tell you that I don't know where your city is, but I'm sure you got something, right? If you're a bigger city where space is more at a premium, you have more options. There's more businesses for you to go contact and try and find somebody that can possibly accommodate you. If you're in a smaller city where there's many fewer options, at least space is presumably not as much as a premium. And so you can hopefully, one of those things will balance out, right? In Baltimore, we're kind of right in the middle. Like space is somewhat at a premium, but there's also, enough businesses within a couple mile radius that like it's pretty reasonable to find an option. And in this case, find 2 really solid options. And I should say too, there were other businesses that were like also kind of just as good that we just didn't get down the list to. Like if it hadn't worked out at one of these 2 or both of these, there were other options we had. So I gotta believe wherever you are, you can make this work by looking for a beer garden, a brewery. We've talked about libraries and things before. I've heard of people running Cube events at libraries. I think it's probably very dependent on the vibes of the given library and what their sort of, rules are, but that's also options.
And the vibes of your playgroup, I could see
certainly
them.
The vibes of your playgroup.
I could see the vibes working and I could see the vibes not working.
So I want people to just know that I truly believe it is possible for you to have in your city, wherever you are listening to this, a 2 to 3 to 4 pod Cube Night regularly if you put in the work to make it happen.
And I think, honestly, if you're starting from scratch or just a couple friends, that honestly might be easier. I think we were a little bit concerned about what happens when we show up with 32 people and we're just taking over half of the space.
Yes.
Like, is that going to be
That's a really good point.
A problem? But if you're just like, we have 6 people, like, breweries are set up to handle
a normal thing.
6 people at a table playing games together. So, I mean, I think if you have a large group, definitely you want to go, like, try and make contact, try and ask. But if you're a smaller group, it's going to be even easier.
Yeah. The other thing that's happened recently in our Playgroup I wanted to talk about is really I wanted to like share my pride in the fact that the week I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago at this point, apparently a 10-year-old child showed up to draft Cube with us.
It's true, that did happen.
And every week since, this same 10-year-old kid has been out, I think 11 now, I think his birthday was within the past couple weeks, has been out to draft Cube with us. And I think it is so beautiful how he just fits in with our playgroup. Like, it has not been weird. Nobody has been like strange about it. Like, it's just been a perfect fit.
I will say, Vinny certainly made a face when 3 games in a row, this new member of our playgroup, turn 1, mountain lightning bolt your face.
Look, it sends a message. It's, obviously this is like completely anecdotal. This is one particular kid in one particular playgroup, but I think it really speaks to the type of community we've built. We have had people ask us before about like, how do you have such a diverse group of people playing Cube, whether that's gender expression, age, income, whatever, that we do a relatively, as far as Magic playgroups are concerned, a relatively diverse crew.
Important caveat.
A very important caveat. And whatever work we've been doing, to me, this kid, I'm not going to say his name because that's weird, but I do know it though, I swear. This kid showing up to play Cube with us for the past...
Tell us his name and birthday.
This kid showing up to play Cube with us for the last 4 weeks and showing no signs of stopping is such a great testament to like how a Cube playgroup can be welcoming, right? I think people often think of like a welcoming Cube playgroup in very specific terms, and they wouldn't think of one of those terms as being welcoming to a 10-year-old. But how
is he allowed in the brewery? Is that cool?
I think most breweries...
He's there. He's been coming with a guardian.
Yes, his father's with him every week, and it's actually very funny to me that his father's like, I don't get it. I don't know what he's doing.
I'm going to read my book and enjoy my beer.
Read a book, yeah. I think most breweries, they card you when you go to the counter. They don't require you to be carded to get in the door.
But these are good questions.
Because they are more... Like, a brewery compared to a bar, like, it is a more social space.
Okay, that's a good point.
Like, there's shuffleboard at breweries and stuff where you could just show up and shuffleboard.
But these are other things to consider. Like,
for sure.
The brewery is also, for a lot of reasons, for a lot of different people, maybe not the most appropriate space. So
yeah, I mean, we also have recovering alcoholics in our playgroup, and it's like, I definitely had a chat with them. Like, are you okay with us playing in a brewery?
Will you enjoy a kombucha?
Yeah, like... making sure you make known the non-alcoholic options if you are at a place that is known for primarily serving alcohol is a great expectation setting thing you can do when you're setting things up. But I was just thinking how if you are thinking of your playgroup, I think it would be a great goal for you to imagine making your playgroup welcoming to a 10-year-old. Whether a 10-year-old comes along to fill that role is irrelevant. I think you should have a playgroup that if a 10-year-old did rock up and wanted to play Magic, it would not be like, well, what are we going to do, right? And that means, like, no anime titty playmats. That means there should be some kind of cube that is simple enough that, like, a 10-year-old who's reasonably seasoned at Magic for his age could potentially muddle through it. It means that the vibe should be such that if somebody wants to ask for help or a suggestion on a, sequencing thing or a mulligan or has a rules question, that should be not discouraged. It means that, like, if somebody's making obvious mistakes and you ask them if they want their mistakes to be, corrected, or they want a tip, there's a culture of giving that, right? Like, all of these things are why this kid can just rock up and play with us, and it's not weird, because we're all like, yeah, that's how we play here, right? We're taking it very casually. No one's malding. Like, we're here to have a nice time. But those things are not a given in a lot of playgroups. Like, in a lot of playgroups, some combination of those things are not the culture, and therefore, the idea that, like, a 10-year-old would show up and play Cube with you, some people will be like, well, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to, like, spike this thing out. I don't want to be playing against a 10-year-old because they're not going to be a challenging opponent for me. It's like all the things we've done to make a culture where we're just here to have fun and play Magic has made it so that this kid just slots right in. And I really think that's a cool, abstract model that playgroups can aspire to. Just imagine the 10-year-old.
It's like the OXO Good Grips model. You don't want to design for your core audience. You want to design for the extremes of your audience.
That's how all accessibility works. I know people that work in specifically just accessibility design. And it's like, without fail, making something better for an audience of people that is somehow limited in their capacity or ability is going to make it better for everybody else as well, even if it's in just a very marginal way. Yeah, I was just honestly just very proud of that. And it was my favorite round of last week was for sure the third round I played against this
I was
kid.
wondering if I should ask, did you win that match?
I did end up winning the match. Here's what I'll say about this kid is also part of why this is working, right? I can imagine a lot of 10-year-olds that wouldn't have the patience, wouldn't have the willingness to lose. I'm not sure he's won a match yet in the 4 weeks he's been out, which, to be fair, he shouldn't expect to. He's 10, right? Like, no, he must have won a match because I was playing him in the 1-1 bracket. He must have won a match last night. No, my third round, I played against this kid, and it was a fun match. I had a great time, and at the end of... First of all, I thought it was really cute. You were sitting next to him because your round was already over. You already finished your draft, and you were kind of sitting there, maybe a beer or two in, and he kept asking you, like, what would I do here? And you were just like, oh, dude, I don't know. Magic's so hard. I'm not good at this game. Don't ask me questions.
I'm like, I would keep that hand with 6
but
lands
you shouldn't.
in it, but you shouldn't.
It was so cute to have this 10-year-old asking you a question and to have you couch it in the sort of complex you were like, I can't give you the perfect answer. And everyone around is like, Anthony, he wants the answer that is better than the one a 10-year-old could come up with. Like, you don't have to be the best at Magic. You have to be slightly better than a 10-year-old to offer a piece of input on this particular.
Okay, that's fair.
But it was very cute nonetheless. And then at the end of our first game, honestly, like his deck was just better than mine in this game, right? Like, he made some sequencing errors or whatever, but that's normal. But the cards he cast, I was like, I'm going to lose this game, and not because I'm not trying, just because I got my big threat control magic, I don't have a disenchant, and then he resolved Consecrated Sphinx. Okay, I'm going to lose. Like, that's just how it's going to go. And he made some, like, very obvious sequencing mistakes on the last turn of the game when it's like, you got to kill me right now, otherwise you're dead in the crackback. And I asked him, I was like, do you want a tip for how you might navigate this turn? And then I like walked him through how he could kill me. Because he also had Future Sight, so I knew half the contents of his hand because he had drawn them off the top of Future Sight. And I was like, I think you can probably kill me if you do this, this, and this. And he was like very gracious and was like, oh, it's cool. I didn't notice that. Thank you for telling me. And then immediately started talking trash. He was immediately like, yeah, I beat you in that first game. Like, I got him pretty good. And like somebody else came over. He's like, yeah, I won. I'm winning right now. Just so you know, that's how it's going.
You guys heard of Pyrite Spellbomb when your opponent's at 2 life? It's pretty cool.
I was like, kid, you can't talk trash after I tell you how to kill me. He's like, yes, I can. I'm doing it right now. What are you talking about?
That's
like,
your mistake. You shouldn't have helped me.
I genuinely got dunked on, and I was like, you can't talk trash. He's like, I am talking trash. What do you mean I can't do it? I don't understand. And I'm doing it right now, and it's working out great. The other highlight for me was that at some point he asked you for the 4th time for input, and you were like, I don't know, man, Magic's so hard. And then somebody was like, go ask that guy, and pointed to Julian, our local Pro Tour player, probably, I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say the most skilled player in our play group. And
Julian gave him some very specific, detailed feedback.
Well, Julian is also, I mean, to Julian's credit, Julian loves talking about Magic, as I think almost every great Magic player probably does, but like, he is always so down to be asked for input on a hand or like a hypothetical scenario or a board state. Like, he is always so gracious with his time and attention. But this kid asked him for, which card should I bottom on this mulligan to 6? I have 7 options. Please tell me which one to choose. And Julian, first of all, took him away from the table, which I thought was great. That he respected the sanctity of the game so much. He's like, I don't want your opponent to hear what I'm telling you about your hand.
He would use one word to describe Julian. Professional.
Professional.
Well, I'm a professional. I'm serious, and I'm a professional.
Anyway, took him away from the table, and then we could see him pointing to like every card in the hand and gesturing at things and talking to him for like a full 2 to 3 minutes. And I watched this kid's eyes completely glaze over. Like, he was like 1,000-yard stare. He was just like, man, I want you to tell me which of these 7 ones to put on the bottom. And Julian's like, well, if you imagine 4 turns in the future, you're going to want to have this in your hand, but you are on the draw, so maybe you don't want to care about this as much. And it's just like he's going through all this detail.
Can you tell me about what cards you have in your deck?
Yeah. Well, what are your outs to this kind of situation? It's just so cute to have Julian like so earnestly, like, honestly, that's part of why this works though, right? Like, we're not treating him like a kid in some ways. He's a Magic player. And so Julian's like, you asked me for advice? Here's my advice. Listen to my thesis on which of these 7 cards you should put in the bottom of your deck on your mulligan. It was so adorable. I loved it so much. And it was honestly the most fun I had playing Magic all night. I'm like, we need more 10-year-olds out here. This is how it really, I think it's really great for the play group. I genuinely do.
Is part of this sort of like a comeuppance is the wrong word, but sort of like, I know you had a frustrating experience when you were a 10-year-old playing Magic at the mall and went and got
I wasn't
beat up
frustrated at the time.
Oh.
No, I just liked being around Magic cards. I didn't care what happened. What I reflected on as I was older is that I lost all the time, and I thought it was just because I was bad at Magic, and then retroactively I was like, oh, it's because I was 9. Of course I was losing all the time. I wonder if I would have stuck to the game more if I had a play group like this instead of, going to play what was probably at the time Extended.
A bunch of spikes just comboing out with Tolarian Academy.
Well, that was for like one weekend, basically. But I played at the store. I used to go to the Games Workshop in the Exton Mall, which is near enough to the town where I grew up, and play Magic once a week. And it must have been like Extended, some constructed format. And I just had a kitchen table deck. Like, I did not have a deck that was even remotely on meta. And so I, of course, got smoked all the time, regardless of whether we were in combo winter or not. It didn't matter. I just didn't have any awareness of a competitive meta or how to build a deck properly. I just had cards that I liked. But I just want to be around Magic cards so much that I still had a great time. But, I mean, this kid is winning games and winning matches and is taking his losses really elegantly, and no one's being weird about it. I think it's just, I honestly think as much as it's a sign of the health of the play group that, like, he was able to show up and just start playing and it wasn't weird, it will be also so much better for the play group if he keeps coming out. Like, to try and verbally explain the vibes of a Cube Night, you have to spill so much ink before you would get to as much clarity as sitting down at a pod next to a 10-year-old. Like, everyone's going to behave differently. There's a 10-year-old here. Like, that's how everyone should be behaving all the time, though. And it's just so cool to have that manifested in our local playgroup.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just been so exciting to see the way that our Cube community has evolved over these last 5 years and the way that that has influenced broader Cube communities. I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, I am too. It's been a wild ride, and, you know, this show is something I really treasure, but more than that, the format and what we've been able to contribute to it, what we've had the sort of privilege to contribute to it, is something that I really treasure. And that's why I don't want to stop making the show. But I need my weekends back, brother. I got to do something else. I really do.
You got some Koji projects lined up?
Honestly, no. Not even close. But
thank you for being honest.
But I would be lying if your recent commitment to this hobby of yours was not like, I was like, I want that for me, but my thing, not Anthony's thing. Like, it's so inspiring to see you getting really invested in this and spending a bunch of time and energy on it, and like, it seems very rewarding. And I'm like, I want that. I want that for me, but a different thing.
Well, I hope you find it.
Yeah, I'm going. I mean, I already know what it is. I got all the stuff sitting in that cabinet. What is it? You'll never find out. You'll find out someday. Anyway, I think that brings us to the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. If you enjoy this show, if we provided some value to you over the years, I would love for you to consider throwing a little money at us on Patreon. If you don't have the resources, do not give us any money. If it's a stretch for you, don't give us any money. Don't feel like you have to. 0% guilt trip. But if you want to, it's there. I'm excited about the bonus podcast. Magic doesn't exist. And if you like hearing us talk about non-magic, I think you'll really enjoy that show. It's also just very raw and authentic because it is unedited. So you get that too.
And I bet you'll be able to find out what's in this sealed cabinet on an upcoming episode.
Maybe.
We'll
see. I haven't told people about that because if I don't end up doing it, I'll feel such profound shame. I don't want to have accountability. But now I'm taking the steps to making the space in my life to do it. So
I know. I mean, I felt this way with some projects. It's like, I don't want to tell everybody I'm making soy sauce in my basement until it's fermenting.
Yeah. It's a thing. Anyway. All the music for this show is produced by DJ James Nasty. All the magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast. This podcast is produced by Thinking Really Hard About Magic Cards and Speaking to Microphones About It. Future episodes will be edited by somebody who's, I'll ask him if he wants his name on the podcast or not. Anthony, thank you for the gift of friendship for the past 17 years, and for the past 5-ish years, the gift of Cube.
Yeah, thank you for the same, and I'm looking forward to this new adventure in both our new collective creative adventures and your independent creative adventures.